Gentrification is the process of a poor neighbourhood becoming affluent. Not by the residents striking it lucky with the world's littlest gold mine and sharing all their wealth in some sort of weird anarcho-capitalist collective, but by new rich people moving in. Gentrification doesn't always mean that those rich people squeeze out the poor people, but often it kinda does. Go back to some neighbourhood you remember as a kid to find that the community centre has been replaced by a Starbucks, the bodies in the canals have been replaced by rowing boats, and you can't find a cheeseburger for love nor money, but there's couscous being sold out of trucks, and you've got yourself some gentrification. Half of all gentrification in the US since 1970 reportedly took place in New York, Chicago, and Washington. I come from a northern English town where in my lifetime the riverside docks have been transformed from relics of industrial glory to faux luxury apartments for imaginary yuppies. That city didn't experience gentrification because since I've been alive its population has declined by 20%. It didn't need to push poor people out because not a lot of wealthy people wanted to come in. Gentrification isn't something that happens everywhere. In fact, many say that it's quite rare. And rest assured, if somewhere was 1970s brown trouser poor, it's probably just as poor today. Yay. At the same time, gentrification is intense in places like Manhattan. In London, people have been talking for a long time about when it'll be impossible to live within an 8-mile radius of the Shard and earn under 50 grand. I think that should be happening around about now. What I'm saying, as I suppose is the caveat for talking about everything, is it's complicated. I've never lived in an affluent neighbourhood, and I think if I was living somewhere and it started to become affluent, I'd probably move. Not because I have an aversion to men in boots, thin trousers, and all too clean fingernails, or because I don't think beer should be $5 a bottle when I can still taste the cleaning fluid that you used in the kettle in your shitty microbrewery, although maybe all of those things. I would leave because I've become very used to living cheaply, and I just couldn't justify it. All those words that have just fallen out of my mouth are just as to do with poverty, weird, moneyed tribalism, and house prices as they are to do with gentrification. I think it's worth saying that this is how gentrification could start. Some misanthropic arsehole who could afford to live in semi-suburbia, thinking, no, I'll live somewhere really nasty. The next thing you know, it's an enclave. Hello, suicide hotline. Well, I should think probably gas. No, not at all. House prices in London are now £580,000, compared to about 220 for the rest of the country. 580 grand is 12 times what the average London denizens earn. Land. They're just not making it anymore. And you can convince people that it really is worth paying 25 times as much to live in one place as another only a mile away. Location, 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 location. There are many different theories about what drives gentrification, and many different theories about what it actually is, but the basic cost of living has to play an important factor. And the basic cost of living is driven largely by rent and house prices. Those in turn are no doubt driven by scarcity and fashionability, and also by how close you are to the nearest subway station. Close enough to be convenient, but not too close that you can smell the piss. Hackney, a London borough once famous for its murder mile and must-see recommendation from dog shit on pavements weekly. In 1996, a house was about 75 grand. Now it's 606. In some recent stories to come out of Hackney, artists and bohemian types are being priced out of their studios. They face rising rents, and those rents are rising because those exact people helped to make Hackney fashionable and helped to regenerate it. It's gentrificating out the original gentrifiers. It's elitificating. All it needs now is for some Arab sheikh to build an underground golf course in what was once one of the most undesirable places to live in Britain. In Britain. Now, I'm not blaming people with a bit of money from moving to a crappy neighbourhood. If anything, I think those first people to do that are pretty brave, in a walking all the way down the drive in bare feet kind of way. The effects on the poor are argued over by sociologists and economists, and believe me, there are still plenty of poor people in Hackney. It's just now they're rubbing shoulders with the middle class. Less well-off people still live in Manhattan, so maybe it's not that they're being priced out, but priced into smaller and smaller boxes. Or having to have their rents, which they could once afford, subsidised. Maybe an area being gentrified even costs local government more in having to pay for more social housing. Of course, one thing I have to say is whether gentrification is good or bad, and it certainly has good and bad aspects, it's completely soulless. Much of Britain was destroyed in the Second World War by German bombs and British artillery shells. So afterward, economically crippled, Britain built flat blocks, estates and estates of council apartments, like where my friend Jumbo used to sell really shit skunk, designed to be social centres. And often these big flats and estates of purpose-built social housing were very deliberately constructed around greenery and social hubs and things like that, and they all became horrible places to live, full of unemployment, drugs and crime. Those places will never be gentrified without tearing them down and building something else. One reason behind there being so much antisocial behaviour historically on council estates is that when they were constructed, there was just no established community. When these places were set up, it was a lot of new people who didn't know each other having to live together. With gentrified neighbourhoods, the only bar is money, and people move there for a lot of reasons, but I would venture that those reasons probably don't include because I grew up here. There's no community in these places, or at least not in the ones I've seen. Sure, there are book clubs, there's yoga classes, there's men with big beards but short haircuts who weren't in the Navy walking around talking to each other, winking and stuff. But that's not really a community, that's just bullshit. Maybe that's more to do with social mobility, but for me, real community is more long-term. My granddad used to live down that street when he was a kid sort of thing. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not saying that deeply embedded communities that live inside each other's pockets are always a good thing. It's those communities that burn people as witches. Gentrification. It's moving to a poor neighbourhood from a more affluent neighbourhood and making that poor neighbourhood more affluent and less characterful in the process. Maybe safer, almost certainly more expensive, and without the guy that all the neighbourhood kids call Banjo Man, walking around in old fatigues and sandals, who'll happily tell you about the morning he's had. Well, that's about it for this bizarre summary. Obviously I haven't touched on everything about gentrification, which, to undermine everything I've just said, some experts say doesn't even exist. Maybe it's the name, gentrification. It should be gentrification. Gentrification sounds like some sort of arcane euphemism. Gentrificating to your every need. Regentrificate that brandy, squire. Well, that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the evening. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to like and join me next time where I'll be discussing corporate jargon and why it's used. See you then. Gentrifoculating!